So just a few days ago, the WBC has a meeting. And at that meeting, they announced that there's going to be a mandatory for Errol Spence. And that's going to be Keith Thurman. Now look, I've been a Keith Thurman fan for a long time. And if you would have told me that this fight was happening back in 2016, 2017, 2018, 19, 20, 2021, anytime during that time period, you told me that we're getting Errol Spence versus Keith Thurman, man, I'm geeked. I'm going to be excited about it. You're talking about two of the best welterweights in the world fighting each other. What is there not to like about that? What's there not to look forward to? Right, we got Keith one-time Thurman, right? One time representing that power, man. He catches you with that right hand. He catches you with that left hook. He can hurt you. And we all know about what Errol Spence brings to the table. How can you not look forward to it? But that's not when we heard this fight announced. That's not what we got. We got this fight being announced as a mandatory in November of 2022, which is coming right off of the heels of the incredible disappointment of when we saw Spence Crawford fall through. I mean, look, man, we've been wanting Spence Crawford for a while. I can't help but look back over the course of the last couple months and think that it was really, truly the closest we've ever been. Or at least I thought it was. At least my anticipation was higher than it had ever been. I really felt like we were going to get that fight. And I'm not to say that it's going to happen in the future, but when we just realized that we're not going to get it now, when we see that come December 10th, we're getting Crawford versus Adavasian, when we hear now that the WBC's mandating that we're going to get Spence versus Thurman, dude, it's such a disappointment. So even though we're getting Spence possibly, because just there's a mandatory doesn't mean we're all automatically going to get the fight, but even though we're going to possibly get Spence versus Thurman, it still feels like a letdown. Two of the best welterweights in the world, two men who are at the absolute top of their craft, performing at levels that blow most of the competition away, and yet it still feels like a little bit of a letdown. You know what I mean? But what are you going to do? Right? So let's put that to the side. Let's not focus on that anymore because it's just nothing but negativity, right? We're not getting the fight we want, but we are getting this one. And let's be honest with each other. It is an awesome fight. Should this one go through, it's going to be amazing. I mean, on the one hand, you got Keith Thurman. When I think about this dude, I think about him almost as a tale of two fighters. Because when you look at back when he fought Sean Porter, Luis Collazo, Danny Garcia, that's not the same way that he fights now. Back when he had the long hair, the ponytail dangling coming into the ring with the braids, he was a different fighter than he is now. Now look, he picked up that name, Keith one-time Thurman, representing the power that he has. Got a good right hand, got a good left hook. He hits you with him, he can hurt you, put a lot of guys down. He's got that type of power that keeps guys honest. But he's the type of guy who's typically at his best when he's being aggressive. That's what you think of with a puncher, right? And that's what you see with Keith Thurman. He wants to come forward. He wants to be on that front foot. He wants to be aggressive, wants to keep you backing up. Now, that's not to say that he doesn't have quick feet, not to say that he doesn't use lateral movement. I mean, he does. I'll even go so far as to say he used too much. Perfect example, you go back and you look at that fight with Sean Porter. You know, back then he almost had a chaotic energy to him. He was moving around excessively, far too much, right? Expending way too much energy. Now, he's a good counterpuncher, but he would use a lot of movement in his counter punches, man. It was like a guy would come forward. He'd have to he'd be jumping back. He'd find the hole. He'd have to jump forward. Because of that, he'd be doing a lot of lunging. He'd be getting off balance a lot. And that does nothing but create opportunity for your opponent. Again, he had that kind of power that would keep a lot of guys honest, but he would also get caught with shots by being off balance. He would also get hurt at times when he would be off balance. I don't like the fact that he didn't use that jab enough. I don't like the fact that he didn't use a lot of feints. I don't like the fact that he didn't work angles enough, right? These are all just small little holes in his game. Now, all that being said, and I'm not picking on Keith Thurman here, man. Like I mentioned, I am a fan of his. There was a lot of people who thought that he was the best welterweight in the world back then. A strong argument could have been made for it. So even though I'm saying all of those things, let's also go out and say there, no fighter's perfect. This was a man who was competing either as a number one or in the argument as the best in the world at an incredibly competitive weight class. But then we saw some layoffs, right? Then he gets some injuries, this and that happens. We see a big layoff, fights two fights, Josesito Lopez, Manny Pacquiao, drops that fight to Manny Pacquiao. Has this another big layoff, comes fights Mario Barrios. And when he went in there and fought Mario Barrios, it wasn't just the haircut that was different. But that haircut, man, it must be representative of what the man brings to the table. Switches up his style's got to come out, whole new look. Now he's working the jab way more. Now he's much more comfortable, much more calm in the ring. You don't feel that chaotic energy from him. He's not using that excessive movement. But I guarantee you he's still got the legs. I guarantee you he's still got the feet. He's not an old man by any stretch of the imagination. You look at him physically, looked amazing, better than ever before. Always been big, always been strong for the division. Always not only had the punching power, but brought a certain physicality to the table. Always seemed to be more of that than what his opponents were in there doing. Always seemed to have that kind of vibe and aura about him. And he was just much more comfortable, right? He fought more like a mature fighter. There were times we saw him in there even fighting a little, dropping that left hand a little bit, fighting almost out of the shoulder roll, possibly looking for better countering opportunities. Just overall, he looked much more in control at times. But here's the thing, that was Mario Barrios. It's not too long ago that we saw Mario Barrios in there with Gervonta Davis at 135 pounds or 140 pounds, right? Gervonta Davis had moved up. But it was Gervonta Davis. You think about how big he is. Let me just quick thing here. Do we ever contemplate a fight between Gervonta Davis and Keith Thurman? Gervonta Davis and Errol Spence? No, man. Nobody ever mentions anything like that. That's madness. People would look at you and they'd say, what are you talking about? These dudes are in two different weight classes. And they're in two different weight classes for a reason. They're two completely different sized men. And yet we now see this commonality between them and Mario Barrios. So when you think about the performance that Keith Thurman put on against Barrios, you have to keep in mind he was the smaller man moving up into that weight class against a guy who was already considered very strong and physical for the division. And we know why Thurman picked that fight. It was a fight that he was supposed to look good in, but he did. He did exactly what he was supposed to do. He passed the eye test. He showed us everything we had. But here's how we got to think about it. How are all of those things going to match up? Not against Barrios, not against Sean Porter or Danny Garcia or any of these other people that you're talking about. We're talking about how they're going to match up against Errol Spence. A man who wasn't considered the best in the division in 2014 or 2015 or whatever you want to. A man who's considered potentially the best in the division now. And even if you don't think he's the absolute best, even if you think that Crawford's going to win that fight, man, you got him like this. You got him that close, 1-1A. That's how good Spence is. So I want to think about how Thurman's going to handle that pressure. Because Thurman's at his best when he's aggressive and he's coming forward and he's on that front foot. He's not going to be aggressive on the front foot coming forward against Spence. Not going to happen. Nobody is. Nobody bullies Spence in the ring. Spence has a hard weight cut down to 147. He is a big, strong welterweight. He's got a reach advantage. He's got an amazing jab. Is it amazing because of how fast it is? He doubles it up, triples it up. That's not why we talk about the Spencer jab. We talk about the jab of Spence because of how he controls his opponents with it, because of how he uses it to frame everything he does, how he uses it to set up those power shots, how he uses it to box his opponents in, get him against the ropes, and tear the body up and land hard left hands. That's why we talk about the jab of Spence, right? It perfectly complements the rest of his game. How's Keith Thurman going to deal with that? How's he going to deal with the work rate? Because one of the things that stands out in my mind during that fight with Ugas, and just mind you, Spence tore up Ugas, beat up Ugas. As impressive as he was looking, man, as much as he brought to the table. You want to talk about a counterpuncher? You want to talk about the counterpunching of Keith Thurman? Let's talk about the counterpunching of Ugas and then go back and review how Spence handled that. But one of the things that happened, I don't know, it was like the 7th round, 8th round, something like that. Anyways, Ugas was starting to get off a little bit. And it's in between the rounds as Spence sitting on the stool. And he's talking to his trainer, and Derek James tells him, you gotta stay busy. When you stay busy, that's gonna keep his hands busy. I'm paraphrasing. Basically what he was telling him was, if you throw enough punches, this dude won't punch back. If you stay busy and stay throwing punches and you're hitting them in the head and the ribs and the arms and the shoulders and the elbows and whatever's available and you're catching it, he's gonna start keeping his hands in his pockets. He's gonna keep his hands home. He's not gonna throw punches back. That's part of the game plan. That's the type of cardio that Spence has. That's how Spence wants to go in there and dominate the fight and beat you up and break you down. By just completely overwhelming you and discouraging you and keeping you unmotivated and humbled from even throwing punches because you're worried about what's coming back. Impressive game plan when you consider what he's done. When you look at his resume and you see everything he's done, and he keeps getting better, man. He keeps getting better. You got to think, is Thurman going to want to keep this fight at range? Is he going to want to work the jab? The jab looked good against Barrios. But is it going to be good against Spence? Does he want to get on the inside and fight? Let's not forget, Keith Thurman has a habit of squaring up on the ropes. Dude, do you want to square up on the ropes against Errol Spence? After he backs you up in the ropes with the jab, he gets at the distance he wants, and then he starts trying to get those hard shots off. You want to square your feet up and just give him nothing but opportunity? I mean, look, I get it. Thurman's a power puncher. He's going to try to come back with hard shots himself, but he comes back with too many single shots, if you ask me. I think Spence is going to have an answer for that uppercut. So look, I'll be interested to see what other people are saying about this one. I'll be interested to find out what some other opinions are as the fight gets closer. I'll definitely be breaking down some film, trying to look at different things, thinking about it from the perspective of, what if I was training Keith Thurman, right? He's got all the athletic talent in the world. He's got the punch, he's got the hand speed, he's got the foot speed, right? But we know the style that he brings to the table. But what would I have him do, right? What kind of specific game plan is he potentially going to implement when he comes into that fight? Because the man's no dummy. He's got a high ring IQ. He's got a very good corner. I'm sure he's going to come in incredibly well prepared, and he's not going to fight that fight the same way that he fights other ones. So it's kind of trying to put myself in those shoes and think about, what's he going to bring to the table, and will it be successful? What's Errol Spence going to do, right? Just sitting in there trying to break down all that film. But as I sit here right now today, I would have to think that Errol Spence is going to be a significant favorite coming into this fight. So let me know what you guys think. Am I overestimating what Spence brings to the table? Am I a little bit too disappointed off not getting that Crawford fight? And really, I should just be focused on how good of a fight this is between two prime welterweights. Am I underestimating Thurman? Am I, basing it off that fight with Barrios, right? Because Barrios was the smaller guy moving up. Thurman was supposed to look good. He did, but he passed the eye test. He did everything he's supposed to do. Is he going to look even better? Right? Is this going to be the best Thurman yet when he goes in there against Spence? And what if it is? What if it is the best Keith Thurman we ever seen? Is that even going to be enough? Let me know what you guys think.